folks there.
Right, right. So, sir, we will start straight away. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this Orthomedics Group CME, which is scheduled for this evening, tea time CME. As I was just discussing with Dr. Amarnath, this is the 19th CME, and this is being hosted from this corporate campus of ours, Cadala Pharma at Ahmedabad. Though Ahmedabad is very much in the midst of containment zone or red zone, we are still able to be working, though we have our own challenges on COVID front. I used to say when the CME started, this is very unusual time. But I think the time is now telling us that we need to say that this is a usual time. This is how it is going to continue, perhaps for a little longer. And I think that's where everybody is adapting to the realities of today's time. And this CME is of great use, great help in discussing these issues. Just today, I think Dr. John shared with us the guidelines that have been published by GOSI, and I think I compliment the entire organization and Dr. John especially for coming out with this guideline. Very well done, sir. I think, as you were saying, that the other version also is going to be get shared, the smaller version as well. So thank you very much for that. And I also thank all the speakers for today. Dr. Prakash Sidegar, sir, welcome. Kunal, who has been in, he and his firm has been in this medical legal issues for a pretty long time. And I'm sure when he introduces himself, he'll be giving all the details. And of course, Dr. Amarnath for moderating today's session along with Dr. John. So without wasting a moment, I welcome you all and straight away hand it over to Kaushik and Dr. Amarnath to take this forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Amit sir, and welcome to Dr. Prakash and Dr. Kunal. Today's session being impact on COVID on rural orthopedic practice is really going to update all the delegates. And we had been trying to rope in Kunal, Dr. Kunal since long on medical legal. He is a medical legal expert, and I think this will be really giving more insight to all the delegates present today. Thanks to Dr. John and Dr. Amarnath for giving this platform continuously and roping in benefits for all the delegates across the country. With this, let me take forward to Dr. Amarnath to take the session forward. Yeah, Dr. Amarnath.
Thank you, Amit and Kaushik for the introduction. And then today, as you all know, it is going to be again one of those evenings with the legal eagles. So this is a lot of issues that we are all practicing with, and we are practicing with our own specialties. But yes, there is a lot of issues that we have been facing time and again. And now with the new world order of Corona being around, those parameters are going to be same or different, how we can incorporate around it without giving much of leverage for or the unnecessary medical legal tangle that we can get into. So Dr. Kunal is being in medical legal for the last 2-3 decades now, and very well established firm, medical legal publishers from Nashik, and his expertise is amazing. And we are going to come out in the next few couple of months. Amit is going to be giving us more good news on that. So we will keep that option now. We'll not leave the cat out of the basket yet. So that is one thing with Kunal. And Kunal, are you ready with your presentation?
Yes, sir.
Fantastic. If you start to share the screen now. And you're going to be having a tsunami of questions after this.
Waiting for it.
Fantastic. I think you can do the slideshow. Wonderful. I will mute myself. We will not disturb you now. You can go on.
Sure. All right. So good evening, one and all. Thank you, Dr. Amarnath, for the kind words. And I hope all of you all are safe in this pandemic scenario, following all the instructions, keeping fit, being healthy, and using this time to upgrade yourself, improve your knowledge, So this is the topic which currently poses a lot of questions in doctors across specialties, medical legal aspects of practice, orthopedics being a surgical branch, being an interventional branch, of course, has a lot of medical legal issues involved. So today we'll be focusing on one of those topics, which is patient's consent. So patient's consent is a very important aspect of undergoing a surgical procedure. By the legal principle, this is one of the most important documents which is required whenever any legal complication arises, wherever there is a case filed against doctor in the consumer court or in the state MCI or in the clinical establishment regulatory authority. Wherever case is filed, the first thing which you will need to prove your innocence or to support your case is the patient's consent. So we'll be discussing all the aspects related to patient's consent, the types of consent, what is expected in an ideal consent form, the validity of consent, the do's and don'ts, and towards the end we'll discuss a couple of case studies, actual cases from Indian consumer courts where an orthopedic surgeon was involved and the case was filed against an orthopedic surgeon and there was some mistake in the consent form. So without wasting much time, let's start with the topic in hand. So this is an inspiring quote I came across. Every test in life gives us an golden opportunity to upgrade ourselves. So this is a different scenario we are living in. So let us use this time to upgrade our knowledge and make a better version of us for the future. So in the Indian context, as you all are aware, the Consumer Protection Act, under which the cases are being filed, this act was not applicable to doctors until 1995. And after a landmark judgment of VP Shanta versus Indian Medical Association, the Consumer Protection Act was extended to all the doctors across specialities in the country. And before that, the concept of consent was not very well discussed or doctors were not aware about it. But as you all are aware now, it is a very important step. So as far as the legal principles are concerned, the law is very clear that patient should have the right to say yes or no for a particular surgery. And the patient should be informed about all the details. Even if it is an investigation, the patient should be aware of all the pros and cons, all the complications, and also the alternatives of the treatment or the investigation for which the consent is taken. So don't consider it as just a formality. Do it as an important step as your treatment plan is concerned. So the law says that an adult patient has complete autonomy over his or her body, and he can consent to any form of medical treatment without the fear of being vetoed by someone else. So if a consent is not taken and you go ahead with the procedure, the law would consider it to be as battery or assault. So it will be an act of assault if a valid consent is not taken from the patient. So even if a surgeon is doing a procedure in good faith, he's extending or combining two procedures, two surgeries in one, but he has taken consent only for a small minor surgery or a minor investigation, then the law will consider that as an assault, and accordingly the liabilities will arise. So take consent to protect yourself from alleged assault, battery, negligence, and breach of confidentiality, because these are the cases which can be filed against you. That is case of assault, case of battery, negligence, and breach of confidentiality. If a proper valid consent is not taken beforehand. So let us see the definition of consent as per the Indian Contract Act 1872. So a broad definition here says that it is defined as when two or more persons agree upon the same thing in the same sense, then they are said to consent. So this is a very old definition. Of course, with time, this definition has changed. And to put it into the context of medical practice, you can say that it is an agreement or voluntary permission given by a patient to the doctor to carry out any investigative or therapeutic procedure, which ultimately will be beneficial in curing the illness and in restoring patient's health. So consent should be taken for any investigative or surgical procedure. It should be voluntarily given by the patient, and the patient should be an adult. You should never take consent from a minor patient. If the patient is minor, then the patient's parents or legal guardian can give consent. Let us see the types of consent and the importance of each. So the first one is the most basic form, which is called as implied consent. This is the most common variety of consent, which is what is followed during your OPD practice or a regular consultation. So implied, as the word suggests, it is understood or presumed. So when a patient walks into your clinic for a consultation, so there is no need to take a special consent for that, because the act of patient coming to you for advice is considered as a type of consent. But this consent has limitations. It is only for basic medical examination. If you have to do some more thorough examination and some other procedures along with the consultation, then you will need a separate consent for that. For example, if you're doing a vaginal or rectal examination, or if you're doing some investigations and you require patient's blood, then you will need a separate consent for that. So implied consent is applicable only for an OPD purpose or a basic consultation purpose. Now let us see the next form of consent, which is express consent. So anything that is other than implied is express consent. So this can be either verbal or it can be written. But considering the evolving scenario, it's always better that it is in a written form, because written consent is something which you can keep yourself as a part of medical record and use it whenever a legal complication arises. So this express consent should be taken for major diagnostic procedures. It should be taken for general anesthesia, for your surgical procedures, for intimate examinations, and also for medical legal cases. Now, proxy consent is the third type of consent, which is a consent taken for a minor patient or a consent taken for a person who is mentally not in a sound state. For example, a person who is unconscious in the ICU, that person cannot give a consent. So such consents which are given by somebody who's other than the patient is called as proxy consent. These type of consent are especially important for critical cases in ICU. Here you must make sure that the legal guardian of the patient, anybody who is signing, is made aware of the critical situation of the patient, and that consent should be specific for the particular treatment which is being offered, and the complications, because if the patient is in on ventilator, if patient is in an ICU, then the consequences and the complications will be grave. So all those things have to be mentioned in the written consent form. Now the next type is something which we'll be discussing in detail, which is informed consent, and which is expected from us in the Indian scenario. Informed consent, as the name suggests, that it is a consent where all the possible information is given to the patient. Information should be very, very detailed. That is the purpose of the surgery, the benefits of surgery, the potential risk of a surgery. If it is a clinical trial, then the various aspects of clinical trial should be disclosed. Any side effects or complications that can happen, along with the percentage of the chances of complication, should also be mentioned. Informed consent generally requires the patient or the responsible party to sign a statement confirming that they understand the risk and benefits of the procedure. Now, an important part of informed consent is you must also give the patient information about the alternatives of the treatment that you're doing. Many a times, the allegation in consumer court by the patient is that they are not informed that there are different alternatives, non-surgical options available. So that is considered as deficiency in service in consumer court. So make sure your consent form consists of the alternatives of the treatment which you are providing. So this is a brief list of informed consent where the diagnosis should be mentioned, nature of treatment, risk involved, the chances of success, what will happen if the procedure or surgery is not performed. So the prognosis, if that particular treatment is not given, should also be mentioned in the consent form. And last but not the least one is the alternative methods of treatment. Now, all this information should preferably be in local language, should be in a language which patient can understand. If the patient understands English very, very well, if not, then whatever is the local language in the state that you are practicing, have a consent form in that language, and make sure the consent form that you have should be in non-medical terms. It should be as simple as possible for the patient to comprehend. And if possible, you can also have some diagrammatic representations or flow charts in the consent form so that it can be easily understood by the patient. Now, the last type of consent is real consent. Now, according to the Indian legal principles, real consent is what is expected from any practicing doctor. Real consent means you must do only whatever is written in the consent form. It should not be nothing less or nothing more than what is written. So that is the legal principle accepted by the Indian courts, that you should perform the actual procedure only what is written. Even if patient requires a follow-up surgery or a second procedure, please don't perform it. Just wait for the patient to come out of anesthesia, take a separate consent for the follow-up surgery, and then go for the second procedure. So this is the accepted legal procedure, except in situation when there is a life-threatening emergency. Only when the patient is in a critical state and you have to do a life-saving treatment or a surgery, only then you don't have to take any consent. In that situation, the consent is waived off by law. So the principle of real consent says that doctors should not impose their authoritative medical knowledge for betterment of patient if there is no emergency. So many a times it is seen that patient is advised 2 or 3 procedures in the same sitting, and the intention of the doctor is of avoiding extra cost for the follow-up surgeries or extra medications which have to be given. So all this is in good faith, but by law it is treated as invalid consent. So stop yourself from extending the scope of the consent. Do whatever is written in the consent form which the patient has signed. Now, this concept of real consent actually came from a landmark judgment by the Honorable Supreme Court of India. It was the Samira Kohli versus Dr. Manchanda judgment. We will discuss this case in detail because this was the case which actually gave a lot of guidelines and principles of consent taking to be followed. So doctors are advised to do nothing more or less than what is factually written. Please make your consent forms procedure specific and complication specific, where no extension or deviation from the specific consent is permitted except in life-saving scenario. So I would request all the surgeons that have a specific consent form for a particular type of surgery. You cannot have a blanket consent form or a common consent form for all type of orthopedic surgeries. So different surgeries have different complications. They have different alternatives and different prognosis. So it is expected that you have a separate consent form for a separate type of surgery. And when you show this consent form in the court, if there is a legal complication, then it should give all the details so that the court is convinced that you have done proper documentation and you have followed the legal principles which is expected under the Consumer Protection Act. And it is always advisable to postpone surgical extensions if required and go for a separate surgical procedure. So let us see the concept of valid consent. What is considered as a consent which is validated by law? So a consent given by a minor who is not competent is considered as invalid consent. Consent given by a person of unsound mind is again an invalid consent. When a surgeon performs a different surgery than the one for which consent was given, will again be considered as an invalid consent. If you exceed the scope of the consent, that is whatever is written in the consent form, and you exceed the scope of it, perform something more than that, that will again be considered as invalid consent. When a different surgeon than the one to whom consent was given carries out procedure, in that case also it is considered as invalid consent. So if there is a group practice, if there are 2 or more surgeons involved, then please make sure that the names of those surgeons are also mentioned in the consent form, because there have been instances where cases have been filed in the consumer court and doctors and hospitals have been guilty. They have been held guilty because only the name of one surgeon was written in the consent form. So that should not happen. Now let us see what the MCI guidelines have to say about patients' consent taking. So as per MCI regulation 2.3, it says briefly about consent taking that the physician should neither exaggerate nor minimize the gravity of the patient's condition. He must ensure himself that the patient, relatives, and responsible friends have such knowledge of patient's condition as well serve the best interests of the patient and the family. So this is a brief requirement of consent that they have given, although it is pretty vague. Again, regulation 7.16 says that before performing an operation, the physician should obtain in writing the consent from the husband or wife, parent or guardian. In the case of minor, the patient himself, as the case may be. So again, this is a very brief version mentioned in this regulation. Regulation 7.17 says that if you need to publish any photographs or patient's details of for a particular study, then the consent of the patient should be taken. So whenever you are doing a study or research and you need to publish photographs or case reports, then make sure that the patients are aware about it, consent is taken if you are disclosing the identity of patient. So these MCI guidelines, which were issued in 2002, long way back, after this many landmark judgments have come from the Honorable Supreme Court and National Consumer Court. So these judgments are considered as case laws, and based on this, the concept of patient's consent has evolved, and we follow those guidelines while forming an ideal consent. So there are some situations where the patient's consent can be waived off. So these are the following scenarios. First, when there is a life-saving emergency situation. Second, when the patient is incompetent to give consent. Third is called as the concept of therapeutic privilege. Under this concept, the physician may withhold information if disclosure would be upsetting or otherwise would interfere with the treatment or adversely affect the condition or recovery of the patient. But if you are withholding such information from the patient, you must give all this information to the patient's relatives, guardians, and you must take their signature that they have been informed about this information, but you have withheld this information from the patient for obvious reasons. However, this clause of therapeutic privilege should be used rarely and not frequently. Also, some unique situations like these where consent may not be required for a treatment of immigrants, member of armed forces, when there is a court order for a psychiatric examination or treatment from a written order of the court, if treatment of prisoners have to be done, and when there is examination for insurance policies for a checkup before the policy is issued. In those conditions, you don't need to take a separate written consent from the patient. Now let us see what is an ideal consent form. So for the ideal consent taking, please make sure that there is good communication between patient and the surgeon so that all the doubts are cleared. Now, normally the practice of consent taking is such that in hospitals, there are paramedical staff and junior doctors who discuss all this with the patient and they take consent. So make sure your entire team is sensitized about this consent taking practice. They must be made aware of the requirements of ideal consent. Make sure the patient's signature is there in the consent form, and there is a signature of the witness also along with it. And also the signature of the treating surgeon should be there. The name of the treating surgeon should be there. And it is always a good practice to have a few handwritten lines by the patient in the end of the printed consent form saying that I have understood the complications of this surgery and I give my consent to the same. So such 2-3 handwritten lines will always add to the value of the consent form. So other precautions, make sure that it is in the local language that the patient can understand. Use simple non-medical terminologies. Make sure that there is no overwriting or cross-writing in the consent form. It should look like it's a genuine consent. Don't add any sentences or clauses later because that will be taken as tampering of records by the courts. So make sure there is no overwriting involved. If there is a lot of overwriting, it's better to go for a new consent form. So pictures and graphics which will inform the patient about the surgical procedure and the details of the post-operative aspects also will help in the consent form. And make sure that these are accurate enough. So prepare a separate consent form for a separate surgical procedure. So these are the details expected in an ideal consent form: the date and time, patient's name, age, signature. If patient's proxy is there, then his signature, the name of the doctor, MCI registration number, signature of the concerned doctor, witness, the name and signature of the witness who was present at that time. The disease-related consent form should have the diagnosis along with comorbidities, if any. So if you're going for a surgical procedure, then the nature of surgery, the risk, benefits, alternatives available, and adverse consequences of refusing treatment should be mentioned. So there should be a separate consent form for anesthesia. If you're giving local anesthesia or general anesthesia, it's advisable that your anesthetist should have his own consent form wherein he has informed everything is mentioned in written about the pre-anesthetic checkup, the investigations which were done, the type of anesthesia, post-anesthetic complications which will arise. So always have a separate consent form for anesthesia. If you perceive any blood transfusion that needs to be done, then have a separate consent form for blood transfusion along with the related risk, if any. If you feel that patient might have to be shifted on the ventilator, then for critical patient or for high risk patients, there should be a separate consent form. And try to document the fact that patient and relatives were allowed to ask the questions and those questions were answered to their satisfaction. So this last point should be done for every consent form. That will add to the validity of the consent. So these are common mistakes which I've come across in consent forms, based on which doctors are taken to consumer courts, where if when they feel that procedure is very minor or trivial and consent is not taken, or only verbal consent is taken, that should not be done. Consent of relative is taken when the patient is an competent adult. So many a times the practice is to take consent from the patient's husband, patient's wife, or parents. But ideally, the consent of the patient himself should be taken, because if the patient is competent, then the patient has the right to decide whether he has to go for a surgery or not. So if somebody else has signed, then that will be considered as invalid consent. Blanket consent is normally taken in our Indian scenario. So blanket consent is normally the practice which is unfortunately seen, where a common consent form of one paragraph is present, where the details or specific complications of surgeries are not mentioned. So this blanket consent form is considered as invalid consent by the legal authorities in India. So please stop the habit of blanket consent form. This is taken as an invalid consent by the consumer courts. The consent is not procedure specific. Many a times consent for blood transfusion is not obtained before surgery, so that is should not be done. Fresh consent is not taken for a repeat procedure. So if you're doing the same procedure for the second time, it is expected that you take a separate consent. Procedure related information is not given, so that in that case it will not be considered as informed consent. Even if the information is given, it is not documented, so the court will consider it as a valid consent if it's mentioned on record. Anything that is verbal will not be considered as a part of medical record. Many a times, this is a mistake, that consent forms do not have signature of the treating doctor or the surgeon. So make sure the consent form is first signed by the surgeon and then the patient signs it. Consent is not witnessed. That is a common mistake. And alterations or additions are made in the consent form without patient signed authorization. So don't do any overwriting or cancellation. If you feel that something has to be added, then takes patient signature next to it, whatever additions are to be made. So these were the common precautions and common mistakes which are done during the consent taking procedure. Now let us see some landmark cases related to consent taking from the Indian consumer courts. Now this Supreme Court judgment, which gave a lot of clarity to all the practicing doctors about consent taking, is very important from the Indian scenario. So we must know in brief about this case. So in this case, the Dr. Manchanda was a practicing gynecologist and Samaira Kohli was the patient. She consulted Dr. Manchanda for a gynec problem, and after examination, she was told that she needs a laparoscopic surgery. And the complaint of the patient, Samaira Kohli, was that the gynecologist did radical surgery wherein her uterus, ovaries, fallopian tubes were removed without her consent. So she was admitted in the nursing home of Dr. Manchanda, and the consent given was only for laparoscopic procedure. And it was mentioned that laparoscopy can be extended to laparotomy, but unfortunately the doctor, he performed hysterectomy, and when the patient was anesthetized, the consent was obtained from the patient's mother. Now when this was observed by the Supreme Court, they considered that as deficiency in service, and they held that such a consent which is taken from patient's representative is invalid consent, because it is the patient who has to take the call whether he has to undergo the surgery or not. And in this case, the consent was taken from patient's mother. So some important observations for this landmark judgment was, when a patient's consent is taken for a diagnostic procedure or surgery, Such consent cannot be categorized as permission to perform therapeutic surgery, whether conservative or radical, except in life-threatening situations. Also, when a patient's consent is taken for a particular procedure, that consent cannot be used for an additional procedure. So restrict yourself to whatever is written in the consent form. It should be real consent. The court also observed that while additional surgery was beneficial to the patient in terms of saving time, suffering, pain, and expenses, this was no ground for defense. So even though the act of Dr. Manchanda was in good faith to save the time and suffering related to a second surgery, but that cannot be the defense which can be given by any doctor or surgeon. So restrict yourself to whatever is mentioned in the consent form. So only on emergency situation, you are allowed to exceed the scope of consent. And when you know that the information would be harmful to the patient, only in that case, you can waive off this practice of informed consent. Now let us see some cases related to orthopedic surgeries wherein consent was not taken properly. So in this case, the patient met with a road accident and suffered injuries to both the wrist. He consulted an orthopedic surgeon who diagnosed the case as fracture. He was advised surgery, and accordingly, he consented for the surgery. But after surgery, patient was having swelling and pain from the surgical site area. After removal of the plaster, the patient found his left hand to be abnormal and crooked. So this was the allegation that the healing did not take place properly. Later, patient approached other orthopedic surgeons for multiple opinions, and he was diagnosed as a case of volar and radial displacement. CT scan was advised, and he was also advised second corrective surgery. Now, the allegation of the patient was there was negligence during this surgery, the first surgery, and currently the patient is unmarried, he's become handicapped, and all this he has blamed on the orthopedic surgeon. He filed this case against the orthopedic surgeon and the hospital before the State Consumer Commission, where a compensation of rupees 10 lakhs was demanded along with the cost of the treatment. Now let us see the defense of orthopedic surgeon. So the ortho surgeon said that he has performed the surgery as per the standard protocol, and after surgery he has taken an X-ray, which the X-ray shows that there was stability, and when the patient was discharged, the patient was in good health, and there was proper reunion which was seen on the X-ray again. And he also said that it was a comminuted type of fracture which takes around 6 months for recovery. So as per the orthopedic surgeon, there was no negligence or nothing wrong in the surgical treatment. He also has accused the patient of threatening him and asking for financial compensation that was illegal in nature, and the charges of medical negligence are baseless, and he has followed the standard line of treatment. So the orthopedic surgeon has asked for dismissal of this case from the State Consumer Court. Now let us see what was the verdict in this case. The State Commission, because they thought that this was a complicated question, they requested the opinion of an expert committee of doctors, and the doctors working in Government Medical College, senior orthopedic surgeons were asked to go through the entire case records and give their opinion. So their opinion was that the diagnosis of comminuted fracture of lower end radius of left wrist and fracture of the shaft radius of right forearm is correct. So the diagnosis was correct. Such fractures need operative fixation. Hence, the treatment provided to the patient is in line with the standard operating procedure. So there was no negligence as far as the diagnosis and treatment is concerned, as per the expert report of orthopedic surgeons. The patient noted a deformed wrist at 6 weeks post-surgery, which was diagnosed as malunited fracture of distal radius, which is not uncommon even after surgical treatment. So the complication which happened in this case is an expected complication as per the expert committee report. And the X-ray has been produced, but the X-ray shows no abnormality. So the X-ray also proved the treatment of orthopedic surgeon was correct. However, there was some lacunae which was observed by the State Consumer Court, that the consent form which was produced was a blanket consent. That means it was a very common consent form, which was not an informed consent form. The patient and relatives were not informed that there were chances of malunion. Patient should have been made clear that the results of the surgery may not be totally to his satisfaction. So even if this information was verbally given to the patient, it was not written anywhere in the medical records or in the consent form. So this was considered as something which was deficiency in service on the part of orthopedic surgeon. And also, instead of informing the patient about these complications, the orthopedic surgeon advised him to undergo a physiotherapy, and therefore they did not give him correct information that yes, this was an expected complication, this can happen. And the doctor was not honest with the patient after surgery also. Therefore, the surgeon and orthopedic surgeon were held deficient in service in this particular case, only because of wrong consent taking. So consent taking, which was expected by the legal standards, was not done in this case. So the orthopedic surgeon and hospital held deficient in service. Compensation of 5 lakh was awarded for not taking informed consent. So there was no medical negligence which was proved in this case. The court held that the treatment which was given, the surgery which was performed was as per expected standards. But the record keeping and the consent part was not done up to the expected levels, and therefore 5 lakh was awarded as compensation. So what do we learn from this case? Performing surgery without obtaining informed consent is considered as deficiency in service. The standard of care which is expected from any doctor, it involves the duty to disclose to the patient about the risk and side effects about the alternative treatments. In the future, a lot of cases will be based on the theory of lack of informed consent. So this problem, which is mainly because of overlooking the consent taking aspect, gives rise to a lot of litigations, lot of cases which have been noticed across all specialities of doctors, that consent taking is deficient, and this is taken as a very negative point in courts across the country. Let us move on to another case study where again the decision was in favor of the patient. So a young man was admitted to a government hospital with complaints of convulsion. So he was advised IV medications like phenytoin, mannitol, etc. as part of the treatment. So this IV drugs were started, and the next day the duty doctor noticed that there was swelling on the right hand and forearm, and he asked that the IV line should be changed from the right hand to the left hand. And after a few days, it was observed that there was discoloration, and there were no movements of the right hand fingers. Later, gangrene developed, and it was decided to wait for the discoloration to set in and the line of demarcation to be found. And on the 7th day of admission, the patient was seen by an orthopedic surgeon, and he advised amputation. So the allegation of the patient was that because of negligence of the treating doctors and nurses, the IV line which was not given properly, patient had to lose his fingers, and this case was filed before the Bombay High Court, and the compensation which was claimed from all the treating doctors, including orthopedic surgeon and the government hospital, was rupees 10 lakh. Now let us see the defense of the hospital and the doctors. So the Bombay High Court, again in this case, Bombay High Court also asked for an inquiry report from an expert committee of 4 doctors. So this was the dean of the hospital, along with the professor of surgery, professor of medicine, and orthopedics. So an expert committee of 4 doctors were formed, and they went through all the records and they gave their report saying that patient was admitted for complaints of convulsions, cerebral malaria, and meningitis. He developed gangrene due to extravasation of IV fluids. So this was the main problem here, that gangrene happened because the needle was not properly fixed and the fluid extravasated into the veins, and because of which the complication arose. Also, before amputation, consent was not taken from the patient. Informed consent was not taken. Consent form lacked the proper format which is expected. Witness signature was not there on the consent form. And also the orthopedic surgeon who performed the surgery, his signature was not there. The consent form was in English, but the signature of the patient's father who had given consent, that is in local language, Marathi. Also, there was no signature of any witness which says that patient's father was explained about nature of the surgery and the subsequent amputation which was performed. So the standard practice of consent taking was not followed in this case. This was observed by the Bombay High Court. There was negligence on the part of the treating doctors and nurses. It was their duty to see that drugs were administered properly, intravenously, but that was not done. So this is a case of res ipsa loquitur, which in legal terms means that things speak for himself. So it was a black and white case of medical negligence. And because of this, the patient has become handicapped. So the verdict was in the favor of patient again, and consent taking was not done. So a compensation of 21 lakhs 82,500 was awarded to the patient. So to conclude today's topic, let us remember that consent is a very important legal requirement of medical practice. Please don't consider it to be a procedural formality. Just by getting a simple signature on a form is not an ideal consent. If a patient is rushed into signing consent without giving all the information required, it will be considered as invalid consent in spite of the signature being present on the form. A lot of doctors ignore or are ignorant about the requirements of a valid consent and its legal consequences. It is not only unethical to impart incorrect information to a patient prior to conducting any surgery, but it is also important legally, and you must preserve this consent form for a minimum period of 2 years. So by law, the patient can file a case against a doctor from a period of 2 years since the surgery was done. So at least for a period of 2 years minimum, you must preserve the consent form, which is why you must have a digital backup of all the documents, including the consent form, with you in your practice. Also, sometimes it is seen that indemnity insurance companies also will not cover you if you have not taken a valid consent. So indemnity insurance companies also will raise their hand and will not cover you if a case is being filed and the court observes that the consent which you have taken was not a valid consent. So with this, I would like to end today's topic on patient's consent. Thank you all for your patient hearing, and looking forward to seeing you all again.
Thank you, Kunal. It is very comprehensively that you covered the entire gamut of consent. What I'll do is I will bring in Dr. Prakash now, because if we start to do the question answers, Prakash should be pushed to the corner. So just have a breather for about 10-15 minutes, and then we come back to the questions for both the speakers. It's all right, Kunal?
Yeah, sure.
Wonderful. If you can stop to share the screen, that'd be great, and then we can carry on. Otherwise, I can do it for you from here. Okay, great, wonderful. Prakash, are you on? Prakash was supposed to be on. He said is everything working fine for him, but still. Prakash, can you unmute yourself?
From your side.
Yeah, Prakash,
Yeah.
if you can start to share your screen.
Yes, sir.
And if you're able to put off the video, the audio will be better for us, because I think your link is still not very clear.
Yeah.
Your computer audio, sorry, video can be switched off.
Okay.
Or if it's working fine, we'll go ahead with that.
Yeah, it's working.
It's working fantastic.
Just wait.
Thank you. Yeah, it is just loading. We can see the screen now. It's loading, and you have presentation. And the time now is about 5:27. You got about 15-20 minutes. 15 minutes.
Yeah, I will finish.
Wonderful. Thank you, Prakash. I think your Microsoft is still loading slowly.
Yeah.
Okay. You got a nice background, Prakash, there.
Oh, thank you, sir. Yeah. Shall I start?
Yeah. You have. You can start to do the slideshow.
Yeah.
Wonderful. You're on. You're on.
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. Respected John Ibnezar sir, Dr. Amarnath sir, Cadila Pharma, my colleague Dr. Kunal, and all the my friends. At the outset, I am very sorry for some technical disturbances, as the topic is impact of COVID on rural orthopedic practice. So impact has started showing with the thunderbolts and rains in our area, and the lack of internet for which I have to wait for some time. So impact of COVID-19 on rural orthopedic practice. I am practice in a place where population is 5 lakhs, and mostly we treat the rural patients. So to start with, I will quote, COVID-19 will reshape our world. We don't yet know when the crisis will end, but we can be sure that by the time it ends, our world will look very different. So it is by the Joseph Borrell, and with this positive note, we'll start with my presentation. So going to the background of this COVID, as you know that from last 4 or 5 months, we are only listening corona, and nothing else other than the corona in the news everywhere. So the origin of this virus in Wuhan city, some 6 months of China in 6 months back, highly infective disease it is, spreads by air droplets and contact to the corona positive patient. Mortality is very less, but affecting whole of the world at present, and more damage in the Western world than in India. So if you compare with the previous pandemics, you know that history of pandemics, every 100 years, one pandemic comes and it takes the lives of so many people. So last pandemic in 1920 took almost 2 crores of people live, and then it was settled. And now this corona pandemic is also doing much harm to the people. And as I said that this has affected entire world in all the aspects of the like physical damage is there, mental damage is there, psychological damage is there, economical, and more so in the rural area because of the many problems that we have. So difference from the previous pandemics, because now the media is very active and powerful this time. Communication across the globe is very easy, and because of the advanced technology, whether it's a boon or curse, we don't know, but it has spread like anything, and the fear of the corona, fear of this disease has been more than the what he has affected. It has affected, and the discussion like artificial or versus natural, like biological war, it has again raised many certain issues in entire world. So India versus Western world is suffering more than our country. We have relatively less cases and deaths as on today. It may be because of the herd immunity. The point discussed as tropical country, like we have malaria and other infectious diseases, role of vitamin D, lack of ultra modern facilities in the medical field in India, and pathetic situation of the government health system in rural area. We are suffering more because of the decision makers and lack of the decision making and availability of the proper treatment methods in rural area. So there are points we consider. Fear of the COVID-19. This has crossed its limits, and people are have fear for many folds. And the media hype, as I said, that role of media is very. And because of the lockdown, which is first in our lifetime, there are so many lot of issues. There are human resources issues in the rural areas, as people are not coming for the work in the small nursing homes or in other nursing homes, and economical issues as well, and psychological issues also. And so that to say that it has affected many folds. So, and the role of telemedicine, rural versus urban, are there any differences because of this COVID issue? And decision makers dilemma, it is a very important issue in the rural as well as in the urban area. There is a change in the decision every time and in the day and days to come, and that has caused more problems in the rural area as well as in the urban. And phobia in the people's mind, in the doctor's mind, the doctors are not starting their OPDs right now also because of the fear of getting infected and other causes, and that has really caused damage to the health care system in the rural as well as in the urban areas. And problems of social distancing, people don't know what is social distancing. They are not used to this in India, and that's why there are more problems in our area, because of the other issues also. People are not obeying the social distancing and lockdown rules, and we are facing a lot of problems because of this COVID-19 in rural India. As I said, media hype, because of the electronic and print media, Facebook, WhatsApp, lot of information has been shared, which may be correct, which may be wrong, which may be right, but that has caused panic, and this information has reached almost to the villages, but the treatment may not reach to the villages, but the information or the gossiping has reached to the villages, and that has caused more fear. People are not allowing the outside people even from their village to enter into their village. People are avoiding the doctors and nurses who are staying in the society just because of the fear of getting infected because of them, and whatnot. So the role of media at this time is very damaging the situation. So lockdown issues, as I said, this is first lifetime experience for many of us. Lockdown for so much of period. Now more than 2 months are over. The fourth lockdown is going to come soon, and the issues of lockdown are very much. Patients are not able to come to the doctor because of the policy of the police and other personnel, and policymakers dilemma. Every time and then they are changing the decision. First they say do the practice, then they say don't do the practice. They say take the patient, don't take the patient. So there is a lot of dilemma, especially in the rural area, and that has caused very panic situation for the at least orthopedic surgeons. The second point is regarding the surgeries, whether to do, not to do. We are seeing the patients, how to see, what are the safety measures, and many issues are there which are causing problems in the rural area. Not used for such a situation, and improper implementation by the authorities is a big issue because of the lockdown. Then social distancing, it is very difficult to follow in the crowded localities. People are not aware of this at all. If the doctor says use mask, people are arguing with him, and with one patient there are 2 or 5 or more than relatives, and then it becomes really situation. The waiting rooms of the doctors are overloaded, and doctors are fearing getting the infection, and once they get the infection, there is a quarantine for 14 days and the other procedures also. So this has become a really panic situation. People are not aware, no discipline at all, smaller waiting rooms, and no proper training to the staff is also there. So staff is also getting fear, and their relatives or their kins are not allowing them to come to the duty. And we have to run our show with the shortage of the staff. So practice of the social distancing, avoid non-essential travel, avoid places where large groups of people are there, limit any gathering that includes high-risk individuals, and in rural area, this has been become a very alarming issue. So rural versus urban, as I said, in the rural area, because of the poverty, illiteracy, the population which is more, and many misbeliefs, people are literally scared about the treatment. Yesterday only, I had a patient of intracapsular fracture neck femur, but the relatives were not keen at all. the patient's hygiene was very bad. They were not even ready to wear the mask. They were not ready to follow any of the guidelines given by our staff. So it is very pathetic situation whether to operate, whether to not operate, and if we get the infection, what will be the future. So impact of the leaders of the or the spiritual people that has again taken, and being rural is better in this scenario, as there are always problems in the urban area also, but the problems are different in the both. So small versus big nursing homes, there are many issues. There may be some difference in the issues. There is always a struggle for existence, and which is more in this COVID scenario, and there is definitely survival, and issues are little bit different for the small and corporate nursing homes. Both have their own set of problems, and in this situation, smaller is the better, as you can say that there is in the coming slides. So shortage of the protective measures. There are personal protection equipments which are short, and there are lack of availability of the face masks, sanitizers, hand wash, and even if they are available of the lower standard, and they are sold at a very higher cost, so that many of the doctors are not getting proper safety measures, and that has become one more problem for starting the practice in rural area. Many of the orthopedic surgeons are also fearing to start their own OPD also, forget about operating in such a scenario. So there are a number of issues. Economical problems are also started, because there are 2 months from started lockdown, and even a small nursing home doctor has a liability of minimum 10 families, and practice is almost zero or minimal. No trauma due to lockdown patient, and planned surgeries. There is a big dilemma whether to operate, whether to not operate. What are the guidelines? The guidelines are changing from time to time, and doctors are really in a dilemma whether to go for surgery or not. And because the loans and other liabilities, the orthopedic surgeons in the rural area are really in the dilemma. So the impact of the media news and bombarding of the knowledge, and doctor is also a human being. Because of that, psychological problems are also seen in this time of COVID, and many of the people are afraid of the starting the practice and seeing the patients, and there is a fear and insecurity. There is atmosphere of fear and insecurity among the orthopedic surgeons in the rural area. So people are having the fear that they will, social aspect, there is a social stigma also, and people are having fear that they will get the disease from the healthcare professionals. There is a sort of social boycott. The person living in the society who is doing the job in hospital or in the COVID hospital, they are not allowed to come to the home, asking to vacate the homes if they are on the rented or in the society. Staff not coming to the duty because of fear of COVID-19 and because of the drastic rules of the lockdown, and there is a social discrimination by the certain people about the doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals, and that is causing the panic. And once you get some even suspected patient of the COVID, the entire hospital is closed, and then you have to go in the quarantine for 7 days or 14 days, and that really becomes a panic in small places where there are many false news or gossiping is there, and the doctor they are in really a pathetic situation in such a case. So climate changes, we are expecting that if the temperature goes on, the now temperature is 40 plus in most of the places. Using of the PPE and safety measures if available is a big issue because of the climatic changes, and the corona has not responded to the high climate, and the cases are still increasing, as there are issues of the power failure, internet failure, and load shedding in the rural areas. So one more difficulty in practicing in such. And even district authorities have made some drastic rules, or which are the not favorable for the doctors, like getting the petrol and diesel for our vehicles and for our generators has become the issue. We have to go to the police office and take the special permission for that, and this has caused really a panic situation in the rural areas. So there are logistic challenges also. Even if you decide to plan a surgery, difficulty in getting plants and instruments. In this case, difficulty in getting the blood or other special requirements, difficulty for the patient to reach the hospital because of the lockdown, and ambulance availability on the time is also an issue in the rural areas. Drivers are straightly refusing to carry the suspected patients or the normal patients because of fear of getting infected by this corona. So there are really big challenges. So help from the government agencies, it is very pathetic issue, and the picture depicts I am from the government and I am there to help. It itself shows how this is a big issue. Daily one different order is given. They say on one day they say keep medical shops closed. On the other day they say keep the shops open. One day they say if you are not giving the services, your licenses will be cancelled. The other day some different order. So really it has getting the petrol and diesel, as I said, for diesel generator is a problem. There is no cooperation of any kind from the government agencies. There is no empathy towards the doctor. On the one side, they are saying that doctors are God or next to the God and your services are required. But on the ground level, there is no any facility to the doctors and totally dilemma about the decision making. And in such a scenario, the role of parent bodies is also very important. And fortunately, national and state state orthopedic bodies are supporting their colleagues, their members, and they have drafted the guidelines for the practice. Even Indian Orthopedic Association and our Maharashtra Orthopedic Association have drafted the guidelines for the practice in such a unprecedented scenario that will help the people in the rural area to practice. Guidelines are given, insurance, assurance, and pressure groups are also formed, and that is a big, this is the time when if you are united, then only you can practice and you can survive in such an unprecedented scenario. So unity of the all doctors and association is very important in this. I'm proud to be a member of Geriatric Orthopedic Society of India with Dr. John Ibnezar sir and Dr. Amarnath sir as leaders. They are really doing the constant efforts at updating the knowledge. They are taking webinars for all the orthopedic surgeons on various issues. Social awareness and health education are their priorities, and of course sympathetic approach towards the colleagues and towards the society also. So that has made some sort of feeling feel good to the surgeons like me, who are practicing in the rural area.
Hello, Prakash.
Yes.
Your
screen has gone.
It says your PC has to restart for an update because you have not updated your Zoom platform. Yeah. So that's why it's happening there. Okay. It's okay.
I'm on the screen. Yeah. So there is a role of science and spirituality. So the science and spirituality should go in hand. Faith is of utmost importance for all of us. Evidence-based things should work, and India has the edge in this field over the Western world. So we are definitely optimistic for getting this. So holistic approach.
Prakash? Can you hear us, Prakash? Ganesh?
I think he got disconnected, sir.
I think the issue. Okay, Kunal, what we can do? Kunal is on?
Yeah, very much, sir, very much.
Kunal, I think we will start to sort of get you the questions now, probably, if you're on, and we can take Prakash's questions a little later on. Some of the questions, probably, there are a lot of questions that's been coming in on the chat board. You must have had a chance to look at that, probably. Yes. Have you had a chance? Okay, great. And see, now, there are a lot of other things that we need to talk. Not just consent, but there's a huge amount of barrage of medical legal issues that can be brought in. And today, to all the participants, please restrict your questions and to have the relevant questions so that we also have Kunal coming in another few days' time, wherein he'll be talking to us on the outpatient practice and telemedicine, as well as the digital consultations, both audio and video versions. So there are a lot of other things that can be taken. So if you have any questions related to that, please reserve it for the next session. Today, definitely the consent. Now, one thing I want to ask you, Kunal, the ICD coding is there. Now, today what happens is I will say, I will do an arthroscopy. I'm just giving an example here.
Right.
Arthroscopy and proceed for the right knee. Now, patient has been explained, patient has been told, and two things are happening now. I will just mute Kaushik. Okay, now two things are happening now. Patient has been told all that. On the consent form, as rightly mentioned, arthroscopy is there, but proceed is there. What does proceed mean? Am I going to do partial meniscectomy, complete meniscectomy, or ACL repair, or am I going to be doing the drilling and then patching up with so many, bone grafting? A lot of things can be done.
Right.
So those issues are one. There is another question on that as well. I'll come to that point after you answer this. Can we have that kind of blank? Because every hospital, I've seen the corporate hospitals, biggest corporate hospitals. Right. I've been in the insurance segment for 15 years, and then the kind of the documentation is amazingly pittance, So you know that better than me.
Yes. So, sir, to answer your question, so if you're doing a scopy procedure, and you know that after that there are expected 3 or 4 follow-up surgeries or options available. So have a format ready with you in that when you're taking the signature for your scopy procedure. At the same time, in that form, please mention that these are the 4 treatment options available. And in the consent form, it should be written that patient and patient's relatives have been explained about these 4 treatment options. And you can take the patient's same consent on the same consent form along with the signature of the witness. So have that in written with you. And then during the procedure, if you feel that out of those 4 options, you're going for one option, then what you can do is during the procedure, ask your attendant to take a signature on a separate consent form, which can be attached to the main consent form, saying that we've opted out of the 3rd option out of the four options, or 2nd option, whatever is required. So that will add. So the idea is basically what the law is very clear, irrespective of specialty, irrespective of surgery, that you should not exceed your domain or the scope of procedure. So legally, patient has a right to say no to every surgery. That right should be given. So when you produce this consent form in front of the court, it should be clearly shown that the patient was given these options and he selected one of them. So that is what is expected from every practicing doctor.
I think you made the point extremely clear too. Now, what happens is now, I think even the small hospitals, nursing homes, and everywhere, they should have multilingual consent forms.
Yes.
As well as English.
Yes, and they should also have separate consent for separate surgeries. That's the most important part. You should customize your consent form, I believe, through your association, because since every specialty has different type of surgeries with different complications, if under the umbrella of your organization, you can prepare a common consent form for specific procedures and then float it across. So that will help in standardization, because you are the best judges to take a call on this, on the options available, alternatives available, the prognosis of every surgery. So if it is standardized through association level, like I've seen through Foxy for gynecologists, they have done it. Yeah, so if that is done, I think that is the solution for this critical topic.
Wonderful.
Manat sir, there is a question from Dr. Deepak Dave. He is with S10 Galaxy.
Yeah. So that's
S10 Galaxy is Dr. Deepak Dave. He has some video.
Coming to that. Because in fact, Kunal is already on the chat box to see the questions there. Yeah. And the question what Kaushik was mentioning about is the Galaxy S10, Kunal.
Yeah.
I think.
Ganesh, please unmute Dr. Deepak Dave so that.
The question. What is some of them are privately given to me here, and some of them are given openly there.
He's asked video we do in ICU not possible for all cases. I have not understood his question.
No. I'll tell you. There's partial here and there. That's exactly the point I was coming to. In fact, Kaushik saw some of them, and other things are not seen here. So no worry. Is Deepak on?
Yes, sir. We have to unmute him.
Yeah.
Deepak,
Okay. My first question is, I think you rightly mentioned that we should have the consent forms in vernacular language, our own language, local language. Is that correct?
Deepak, your voice is very. Can you switch off your video if possible? Great. Go
Okay,
on then.
can you hear me now?
Fantastic.
Okay. Is it mandatory to have the consent form, as you mentioned that it was in English and the signature was in Marathi? So we should have consent form in our own vernacular language only?
So actually, it is not compulsory by law or by any other regulation. But ideally, you must have two sets of consent form. If the patient is educated, illiterate, you can take it in English. But in the second case, which I had discussed in my presentation, there the patient unfortunately was not an educated patient, and the consent form was in English, whereas the patient could understand only Marathi. So in that case, the court's observation was that the consent should have been taken in the local language, which was not done.
Okay, second question is, when the government policy for getting the COVID tests for the patient who is to be admitted is changing, as you know.
Yeah.
Earlier, there was a guideline that we should take all the preoperative tests. Now there is a guideline that there is no need to take the preoperative COVID test. We came across one patient who told us that what is your COVID status?
Yes,
that's nice.
So, sir, always.
No. He said that I don't mind spending 4,500 rupees for the COVID test, which is going to come to my bill, which is not likely to be paid by the insurance company. I'm happy to pay. I want to know what is the COVID status of you and the nursing staff going to operate me.
Yeah, so this is actually a very rare situation that you've come across, where the patient is asking. But what is the standard practices from every patient whom you are doing surgery? You must get his COVID testing done. That is absolutely the practice which is followed across all specialties. And in a rare scenario where, like in yours, if the patient is asking.
Sorry, Kunal. Sorry to interrupt you. We cannot do the test preoperatively by law.
So, but you can recommend it if you are doing elective surgery.
No, the nodal officer of the government of Gujarat, they do not give permission for us to do preoperative tests. That's a mandatory guideline officially issued by the government.
Okay, that must be restricted to Gujarat then, sir, because
Kunal, no, I'll tell you what. I'm sorry, Deepak. Kunal, basically, even Bangalore, we are facing issues in corporate hospitals. In fact, the administrators of corporate hospitals are not accepting it because they won't have a government guidelines, and they're not accepting the guidelines given by the organizations.
Right.
They say ICMR has to give, they say MCI has to give, they say the government has to give. These are little issues. And 2 points, like Deepak, we said insurance. In fact, I've written to IRDA, I've been there, and a lot of insurance companies, both the government and the private companies, are paying for the COVID investigation. Yeah. But the PPE is a different issue. Let us not come to that point here now. They are paying for the investigations, and they cannot pay this. Who's that? There was an odd thing coming here. Hello? Kaushik? The security issue has been coming here. What is this? This is not right. Kaushik, what is happening with the security? Kaushik, there's a security issue which is not right.
Hello.
There's a security issue. What is happening here?
What is happening?
Pictures are coming.
There are some new pictures coming here. What is this? This is not right.
Where?
On the screen.
On the screen.
Kaushik, it just came and went away. We will find out, sir, what it is. You please carry on.
I think we should call off Zoom in the future, probably. This is not right.
No, how? Okay, I had not seen that something happened like that. Yeah.
No, it's in the recording. You can.
Recording is done. Recording is on. Recording is on.
Whether it's from outside this group or within the group, we'll find out, sir.
Yeah, please.
Yes, sir.
And with that, see, the issues are going to be there. How do we tackle that? In the ground level, you say the medical legal issue, this is there, that is there, and government is giving it. But each and every government is not acting in the same fashion.
Right.
And I know as a organization, we can call in and then give those things to the government, but it's a far-flung issue because the pandemic is set in.
So, sir, what I would like to see, this is a very uncertain and a fluid situation. The dynamics are changing constantly. Even if you see the legal guidelines and the notifications which are coming from the government's end, they are also being updated regularly because the entire system is overloaded. So, in such situation, what I would give an advice to keep yourself legally safe is go only for emergency procedures. Please avoid elective surgeries as much as possible, unless the situation is really pressing. So that is one thing, and there is no immunity being given to any doctor in this situation. That if something goes wrong from your end, from record keeping point of view, from your treatment part point of view, you are not immune or you are not protected in any way because it's a pandemic. So you have to safeguard yourself. You have to probably be extra careful in all the aspects of your practice. So safeguard yourself, do the documentation, and only if you feel that you need to operate a patient, it's really an emergency, only then go ahead with it. Otherwise, it's better for the lockdown period to get over and let the situations and the guidelines come down, and then you can go ahead with your regular practice, because there is no safeguarding or immunity being offered from a legal point of view.
So Deepak, hope that has answered your question.
Yeah.
And one more question, what you asked me in private. Basically, see, the government is pressurizing the hospitals to admit the COVID patients. And they are looking at the kind of package, what they're giving it. We can't even run one day's, hospital running for that particular patient. The package is so low. And how can we accept it? Are we to accept it, and how do we deal with this kind of situation?
No, I think my question is purely in the legal ground. We are not talking about moral, ethical, social. That does not come into the picture.
Correct.
What legally can government force any hospital to admit and treat patients at their decided charges?
So unfortunately, the answer is yes, they can, because right now the Indian Epidemic Act is being enforced by the government of India. So that law gives all the powers required to the government of India to take control of this pandemic situation. So if you go through the fine print of this Indian Epidemic Act, the government does have the power. At an association level, what you all can do is you all can make representations to the concerned authorities in this case, and tell them that considering the cost involved, the PPE cost involved, other charges
Understand
involved.
that probably we cannot refuse our services
Yes,
for the patient,
yes,
right?
yes. Yeah,
So
yeah.
if they tell
That
me
will be violating the law. If you are refusing, then you will be
we
not
cannot
on the right
refuse.
side of the law. So it is strongly suggested to comply with the existing guidelines, because the situation is extraordinary. This is not a normal situation, and there will not be a clear black and white answer to your question, because this is a gray zone that we are in. It's an involving situation. So be on the right side of the law. It's better not to refuse, because sooner than later this situation will evolve. The guidelines will be coming, as you must have noticed in many other aspects. The government has been proactive. They have been coming up with guidelines. So please be safe from a legal point of view in this situation.
And Kunal, Dr. Shrikant is asking in the chat box, most surgeries involving has GA risk. And the biggest risk is what? The life threatening. In case if I were to talk to a patient saying that it may be a procedure.
Excuse me, sir, there's somebody who's typing on.
No, I'm coming to the chat box questions only. I'm coming from one at a time.
There's a Dr. Amit Trivedi who's.
No, I'm coming to the question because there are a lot of questions which has come in.
Yeah.
I'm coming from the beginning. the question was asked quite a few minutes ago at around 5:30. So let us give the preference there and then come down to questions. So what he talks about is the GA risk. If I want to talk to a patient with the GA risk of the death or the life risk, the patient may run away. How do we tackle that? So this is the question which, I mean, one has to deal with them, but I know what Shrikant means, because in UK we explain each and every parameter.
So who's Dr. Amit Trivedi? We need to...
No, we'll come to that, because the first question is the Shrikant is asking.
No, he's actually abusing on this thing, chat box. We need to let him out.
All right.
Trivedi.
Ganesh?
We have removed him already long before. As soon as he has started typing it, we removed him.
Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kunal. I didn't see that. Thank you. Now, the risk of death, if you can explain, the patient is going to run away, he says. So I know how to deal with it. I think patient, and you have an answer for that. Probably you can tell us.
Yeah, so sir, there is minor risk of death in every surgery in GA, and every judge in the consumer court also understands that. So I did explain a concept of therapeutic privilege in this. So there are minor chances of a patient losing his life. So that should be mentioned in the consent form for general anesthesia. Your anesthetist here has to work and make a specific consent form. For local anesthesia, I'm sure there won't be any risk as such, a major risk. But for GA, he has to prepare a proper consent form, giving details about the complications. And it's always better to write the percentages of each complications. Like if there's a chance of death of 1 or 2%, then if you mention that, then every patient does understand that, some minor percentage of risk is there. So if it is numerically noted in the consent form, specific consent form, so that will really explain it to the patient without scaring him off. And at the same time, it will safeguard you also.
Correct. So I think keeping that in mind, there is document everything what you talk about and talk everything what you document. That has to be very, very clear.
Yes.
That is one thing which I've seen. There's a lack there. And Dr. Uday Kumar from Bangalore is asking what to do when a suspected COVID patient refuses the COVID test. And how do we tackle those issues? I mean, can I, as a surgeon, refuse the surgery or the treatment?
Yes, absolutely, sir. You have the complete legal authority to say no to a patient, unless it's a life-saving emergency procedure.
Sure.
You can say no. That right is very much within the guidelines given by the NCI also. And that is applicable in a regular scenario as well as pandemic scenario. So you can refuse treatment to a patient, definitely.
Yeah, and then Dr. Shrikant in Bangalore has added that about today the British Orthopedic Association has recommended on the 14-day quarantine, which we talk about, and then when the test is negative, we could probably operate. That is fine, and that's been incorporated in our guidelines. I think you must be aware of that. And what else? Other questions you're seeing, Guna?
Patient consented for arthroscopy in a huge corporate setup.
Yeah, he's complimenting you for that. Okay, go on.
It's like Samira College happened in my city, and fortunately for the surgeon, I think sort of he got away, which is a good thing actually. Although the daughter is a lawyer, she's not pressing any charges at present. It's a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah. And a few hospitals have started elective surgeries now. Now there are pressure from the corporate hospitals for surgeons to do that, because obviously, I mean, it's going to be a big exchequer for every hospital. It's not easy to run even in a normal given circumstance. But with the pandemic, the turnover of the hospitality industry, the entire country in the world is down.
Yes.
Now, where do we go? How do we take it forward?
So if you're working in a corporate hospital setup, first of all, make sure you have your personal indemnity insurance also. That should be there with you for every practicing doctor to safeguard yourself.
Yeah.
Secondly, when the lockdown was enforced, at that time itself, it was clearly announced by the authorities that elective procedures should be avoided. So you can take, you can rescue yourself by saying that But still, if you are under a pressure from corporate hospitals to perform this thing, then all the requisites of protecting yourself, the COVID testing, the PPE gear, all these things should be followed. But having said that, I feel all the doctors, all the surgeons in the corporate hospitals should unite and should take a stand, because this is a time when we all should be united. It is a difficult time, and only when we speak in one voice together, we all can protect ourselves, because what might be right for us might be wrong for the establishment.
Dr. Shukumar Kambar want to
Yeah.
ask a question. Shukumar.
Yeah, I am from Dharwad, anesthesiologist and a medical legal consultant too. Dr. Ramannath, I met you a couple of years back in Bangalore.
Absolutely.
In I think some critical care meeting or so. My question is, in this epidemic scenario of COVID-19, do you need a special consent? Okay, apart from what you take as a routine consent, mentioning about the probably I will be at risk, or else from getting operated by the surgeon. So do you need a special consent, Dr. Kunal?
Yes, sir. I feel there should be a specific consent for COVID, this thing, that the patient should agree that, first of all, you must take the travel history of the patient. I have not traveled to any distinct area, and I am not from the red zone, this thing. So that consent has to be taken from.
Yeah, I do agree. But apart from that, 60 to 70% of the patients, apart from traveling history, okay, of that particular geographical area, asymptomatic patients are becoming positive. So in this scenario, do you recommend special consent for this kind of a patient to get operated?
Yes, so consent should be taken. You're saying specific to COVID scenario, right? You must take from the patient, but sir, that will, like you said, if the patient is positive and in the carrier phase, the patient is a carrier, he might not be having any symptoms.
Yeah.
So even if he is positive, but he can spread the infection. So that consent will just be a document with you to help you in the future, in case if your hospital has a spread of infection or it's a hotspot. That consent will just protect you at that point of time. But the nature of this infection is such that patients don't have symptoms, so they cannot 100% say that they are not carriers.
Yeah. In this context, I had a debate with many of the medical legal consultants 2 days back. The consent, what you take specific for this, does not hold good in the court of law, because it is the patient or the relative who has to prove that they became positive because of getting operated by you or in the hospital setup, which is beyond, which cannot be done. But for the benefit to reduce the apprehension of all the surgeons, I have on my own formulated the consent in 2-3 sentences, and I have all your email IDs. I will share it. What I have written is, on account of the existing nationwide curfew due to coronavirus, I have come to the hospital by myself for an emergency treatment. In order to prevent the spreading of the outbreak, it is my responsibility to follow the appropriate precautions measures as explained by my doctors in the hospital. If I am an asymptomatic carrier or an undiagnosed patient with the COVID-19, I suspect it may endanger doctors and staff of the hospital also. I will not hold the doctors and the hospital staff accountable if such infection occurs to me or to my accompanied persons. The patient signature or thumb impression, patient's name, or the address of the relatives with the mobile number. So probably it will ease some sort of a stress even in the hospital. Either way, they can get acquainted with the asymptomatic patients. So this I have formulated, and I have been practicing it in Dharwad with all the nursing homes. I'll share this consent form with all of you in your email.
So very good suggestion by you. I would request you to please email it. I also have made a consent form on this particular topic. Yeah. I think we can share and come out with a common one and distribute it with the other members of the association.
And Shukumar, at the same time, I think we should also have the local linguistic. We need to look at the local languages and probably have that as well, because Dharwad, not everybody will be talking in English.
What the said is, the law says that the consent should be in a vernacular language. Yes. But if I do not know the Kannada, Okay, patient knows the Kannada. I do not know the Kannada. So it's very difficult for the hospital or for me to draft the consent form in Kannada. But if some interpreter is there, whatever the consent form, the interpreter is there, his name should be sufficient in a court of law that patient is made aware of the contents of the consent, whatever you have taken. That should be more enough in the court of law. The other one is government has given a permission for the emergency services or emergency semi-emergency cases. It has asked to defer all the elective cases. Yesterday we had one more webinar meeting with the Minister of Health and Additional Director or the Special Minister of Health Karnataka at the same time yesterday. And within 2-3 days, okay, they are coming up with a SOP. How exactly we should go with the elective cases in Karnataka also. I think it's a matter of another 2-3 days. So we are going to have a SOP for starting the elective cases also.
So
Thank you, Shivakumar.
just to add, sir, what I have understood, this is going to be done at the central level also, because the lockdown of March 17, there will be more guidelines issued, which will be applicable for pan-India level, because it will be better to have standardized guidelines across the country. So that is also something which will be coming up by end of this week.
Yeah, correct. In a situation like that, is video recording of the entire is also valid, or how do we go about it, Kunal?
So video recording of the surgical procedure you're saying?
No. In the consent, say for example, patient is illiterate, like what Dr. Shivakumar was talking about. If the patient is not familiar with the vernacular language, then the video recording is going to be valid in the court of law?
Yes, definitely. So definitely, if you have a recording, yes, if you have it's an added bonus actually, because every hospital and clinic does not have that facility.
But with a smartphone, today's smartphone, we can take the permission of the patient and then start doing that.
Yes.
If a doctor in government sector or private sector,
John, there is a interference from your
delivery direct ಮಾಡಕ್ ಬರೋದಿಲ್ಲ ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಇವೆಲ್ಲ ಕೊರೋನಾ ಟೈಮ್ ಕೊರೋನಾ ಅಂತ ತಕ್ಷಣ ಎಲ್ಲ ಪಿಪಿ ಬೇಕಾಗುತ್ತೆ.
Sorry, there's a lot of interference. Shikhan, go on.
Dr. Kunal, regarding the PPE, if a doctor in the government sector or private sector is not given proper PPE, what are the rights of the doctor and what are the responsibilities of the doctor, both in government sector and private sector?
Doctor can refuse. Doctor can refuse to undertake a treatment of that patient if he does not have a PPE. There's a Supreme Court order recently, which I'm going to share with you if you really want it. So Supreme Court has categorically said that unless you have a PPE, you need not, medical professionals need not risk for treating the patient. What you can do is just do your best and refer it to the wherever the designated COVID hospitals are. That's what the guideline says. Supreme Court categorically said that without the PPE, medical professionals should not endanger their life in this COVID scenario.
Was it for government doctors or private?
So better not to work.
All of them.
All the doctors all across the country.
All across the country, yes.
Please share the verdict, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, so sir, you have to safeguard yourself. If you feel that there is no PPE, you can refuse to treat in that scenario. You are absolutely within your rights to do that. But if you are asked to go on for a particular duty and a particular hospital, in that scenario, a lot of doctors are facing this problem in Bombay also. Yesterday itself, I got a call from a doctor who's carrying his own PPE suit and he's performing the required duty because, as you know, Bombay is a hotbed right now. And they have asked a lot of doctors to come and help them. So he's reporting for duty, but he's carrying his own PPE. But of course, that is not the ideal scenario. So if there is you are asked for an elective, asked to do an elective procedure, then you can refuse, definitely.
Bharat, you want to ask something?
Yeah, I think I'm faced in this situation where I'm forced to comply with the COVID hospital, and my hospital is a surgical hospital. And we do not have any medical facility, neither ICU nor HDU, high dependency unit. I don't know, withdrawing completely would be probably, may not be possible. How do we comply with that? A piece of advice, please.
Kunal?
Sorry, sir. There was some net connection. I just missed you in between. Can you just repeat the question?
Yeah. I'll repeat. At the moment, our specialty is a spine surgery specialty. It is a pure surgical hospital.
Okay.
Neither we have ICU nor we have high dependency unit.
Okay.
And all our staff they are surgically oriented staff. Now I am forced to say that, you make your hospital into COVID hospital. It's only 40-bed unit. And if I have to really do this distancing, social distancing and the bed distancing, then it may end up with only 25 beds. Now, how do we circumvent this? If I say no, then I'm stuck. If I say yes, then also I'm stuck.
So, sir, as per like I said, there is the Indian Epidemic Act, which is currently being enforced. So, as per this act, you cannot deny giving essential medical services to the government. So you will have to learn to work with the authorities in this situation, find the best possible solution. There can't be a yes or no answer to this, because if you are directly saying no, then you are inviting yourself to any legal actions. So the best case scenario in this would be to by protecting yourself, at the same time working with the authorities and making sure that you comply with their regulations as much as possible. But you have to make sure that the proper PPE protection, which is required in that case, you obtain that, and whatever instructions are being given to you, it's always better to have it in written format, so that in case tomorrow, God forbid, something goes wrong, you have all the documentation with you available. So that is, I think, the right way to go about it.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you.
Kunal, thank you. Could Kunal just be online because Prakash has come back on his laptop. Prakash, you can unmute yourself.
Can I take a minute? Another question?
Yes.
In Gujarat, I have the documentation that COVID test you cannot do. Now I have two patients. One I have operated today was the tumor, which the neurologically was worsening. And we had no choice than to operate that patient because patient was going down without COVID test. And I do have the letter from the government because ICMR does not allow COVID test for this patient. Now, how do I go about this? Because we had no choice than to operate, and we did take the consent, as you say, in the patient's own language, that I understand this, and that I know that this can happen, but I have no choice than to undergo surgery because my neurology is worsening. Is this the right way?
Yes, sir. If you have explained all the consequences of doing surgery in this scenario, and the consent, whatever consent that I have made today, along with presence of a neutral witness signature, and when you are giving all the options to the patient, and there was this last stage option, then I think what you have done is right. You have taken everything. But I hope this was not a common consent. Like this was a separate consent.
No, it is a separate consent. Yeah, it is a separate consent, and there are 6 points, 5 points which I have written clearly, and I also have written that there is 25% death rate if I turned out to be COVID positive, and medical situation can worsen.
Okay. So, sir, just to add value to this consent, just these 2-3 points which you have said, ask the patient to write his own handwriting.
Yeah.
So that will, improve the validity of the consent.
Sure. Thank you.
In Karnataka, Dr. Kunal, if
just give me 1 minute. There is a power cut here. Give me 1 minute, sir. I'll be back in 1 minute. Give me 1 minute.
Yeah. I think Prakash can be on now.
Sir, please load your slides. Prakash.
Prakash is not responding. Prakash, we are trying to get you for last 5-7 minutes. What happened? Where are you?
This is a rural setup now. There are a lot of issues with network.
No,
unmute him.
We have to be patient with him because suddenly I think you lose the connectivity.
That's what actually I've been trying for last 7 minutes to call him.
He called me also. Poor chap. I think he's struggling there.
I think he's got a laptop. He's still able to connect to us.
Okay. Bharat and Shrikant. So next issue of our guideline would be adding a chapter on medical legal issues. Yeah. So I'm going to start working on it, and now you will have to contribute significantly.
Sure, sir.
Yeah, Shrikant and Bharat both.
Yeah, sure. With you.
We need to make a perfect, medical legal document now, because there is so much of confusion for me only actually.
Absolutely.
I don't know how much of confusion people will have. I want to ask Kunal. I know he's off. I think I'll ask him now.
Yes, sir, I'm back.
You're back, Kunal?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question, Kunal?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, there is so much of confusion in the consent process. What is happening? Otherwise, also forget about COVID. Even you said so many consents now. This informed consent is one which always confuses me a lot. They say it should be simple, it should be short, but still it says that we should give all details, explain everything, tell the complication in the local language. So many. Can you show us a standard informed consent if you have with you? Can you share that with us? How big it should be, how much it should be, all that.
So, sir, like I said, the law treats all the doctors and all specialties at par. For them, for law, orthopedic and gynecology are not different; they are the same. So, the guidelines given as per the Samira Kohli judgment are very clear that the consent should be real consent. Real as in whatever is written in consent form should be done. So nowhere it is mentioned that consent should be short and simple. It has to be elaborate.
Elaborate means the patient will get confused reading it.
No, not to confuse him, but to tell him the consequences of the surgery, as in the expected complications, the alternatives available, and the prognosis. So these three things.
But it will almost become like a booklet. If you try to give this kind of a consent, it will become like a booklet wherein you write the alternate procedures, you write the complications, the side effects. I'm really confused. You know what they are expecting out of doctors. How can any doctor give so many information? Each procedure is different. That means every time we'll have to have a different consent. For example, I'm doing a radius fracture, different consent. Then I have a hip fracture, I do a different consent. And then there is no end for all this. So, I don't think so. You know, we should be, I don't know. I don't know. You have to explain that.
So I feel, sir, what you should do is all the orthopedicians should get together under your association's umbrella. And you all should mention the minimum possible details. And at the end, it should be told that the patient has been explained, because like you rightly said, you cannot put down everything on paper because it will become a booklet.
Yeah.
So you can write in a summary format that the patient has been explained all the consequences, complications, alternative prognosis of this particular surgical procedure. But having said that, at least have 4 or 5 different consent forms in your practice. You can classify the surgeries, and depending on the surgeries, high risk, there can be high risk surgeries, there can be minor surgeries. So that the law says that there should be a consent specific surgical consent. So don't have a blanket consent form.
Procedure specific consent.
Yes. Don't have
that requires now a lot of preparation on our part. John, we do so many procedures like replacement, arthroscopy, spine surgery, and there we have to write all the indications, the possible alternatives, the complications are really different. I don't know now. I think as a GOSI, we should look into this issue and try to bring out a standard. I don't know. Really, it's confusing.
Yes.
John, Kunal, to stop you here, John. Sorry about that. In UK, we have a consent form which is about 5 pages, John. And in the 5 pages, there are enough columns where doctor can write each and everything. I'm sure Srikanth can add on to that.
Yeah, I mean, say we don't have every procedure specific. For example, if I'm doing a revision surgery, I don't have separate. For the fertility care, I don't have separate.
Correct.
Generic, but I do write everything. I do write what are the benefits of surgery, what are the alternatives, and what are the risks. And I write it in my own language. And since everybody speaks English, this vernacular issue doesn't come there. But that is fairly legally valid in UK. But here, if you have to do in each language, and like for distal radius, one complication, proximal radius, one complication, it really becomes very, very difficult. Maybe a video consultation may be better than you got.
Yeah. That's what I'm thinking now. As an alternative, a video consultation would be better, because there we not have to write. We have to just explain to the patient and record it. So there is no issue of bringing it on paper. But I don't know even whether this video consult will be accepted by the court in the absence of a signed informed consent from the patients. Kunal has to tell me.
Audio is not valid in court of law because fabricate a video. That's what always all the lawyer friends of mine.
Yes, that means the patient
has highest evidence value. The written consent form has got highest evidence value. Yes. I think Dr. Shiv Kumar wants to add something.
You unmute him, please. He is muted there.
also Dr. Kunal, same situation what Dr. Bharat is facing. Say in Karnataka, if the person gets operated and then subsequently found to be COVID positive, then the hospital is sealed for 15 days and the FIR is put against the doctor. So how do you deal with it legally? What's the right way?
Yeah, about the consent is not at all a safety net. Consent can never be a safety net. Okay, any prosecutor and lawyer, however the length it is, okay, the more the lengthier the consent form, the more are the loopholes where the expert prosecutor can find out the loopholes in it. So it has to be precise. It is a procedure rather, I would say. It's not a simple thing. And how exactly you interpret matters a lot, okay, in the prosecution. But any number of pages will not matter. And there are no universal guidelines how exactly the consent form should be. But depending upon the needs, we can formulate, but it cannot be a safety net. The other one is, which is asked about the COVID patients, and if they are not treated properly, their FIR. Yeah, as per the Epidemic Act, okay, recently it's promulgated other things. Discretionary power is given to the district administration. But yesterday we had a lengthy discussion about this, and what they said was the prosecution of doctor will not be there henceforth in Karnataka. Okay, they have clarified it. Okay, and there were some loopholes in the Epidemic Act. They tried to overcome it, and they have overcome it. So, if the patient is treated by the primary physician and some other way, okay, he misses him to inform it to the district administration. So there is a clause stating that we have violated the epidemic law, so that he was prosecuted under the Epidemic Act. The same thing happened recently in Bangalore also. So we have clearly brought to the notice of the health ministry. Probably in another 1 or 2 days, they are going to have a lot of changes in this also. And for the information of everybody, the quarantine changes. The primary surgeon or secondary surgeon would have been quarantined in the institutional. Again, we brought it to the notice of the health ministry. They said that they can be quarantined at their home only. And in the meantime, when the patient's identity is not revealed to the public, why do you reveal the identity of the doctor or the nursing home? Okay, that's so and so patients came positive in this hospital. It creates a social stigma. Okay, those who the patients who were admitted in that particular time, probably they will be traceable. If they are not traceable, it's a havoc. So ultimately, we brought to the notice of the health minister of Karnataka that the doctor's identity and the hospital identity should not be revealed to it. And when the doctors are quarantined, again we brought to the notice that they will be given a designated food or an institutional food. Okay, hospital doctors are the one who are quarantined, maybe hypertensive, diabetic. They are used to the home remedy food or homemade food. Again, Ministry of Government has given a lenience stating that even if the doctors are quarantined in the institution, they may be provided their home food also. So day by day,
just to add, Dr. Shivkumar, this topic of confidentiality, has been in discussion of late at various forums with the government also, because although the Indian Epidemic Act gives a lot of powers to the government authorities, but the identity preservation is a basic constitutional right that we have. So even though it is a pandemic, that right has to be maintained because that's every citizen's right that has to be preserved. So
yes, I agree with you.
So we have legal options for that. So you must, whenever such a scenario is put upon you, you must give your side of it. You must tell the authorities that there are certain situations, privileges that you have even in a pandemic scenario. And I'm sure a sensible person who's in a high position will understand your problems also. So you have to discuss all the aspects and then come to a rightful solution.
Yeah.
In this COVID pandemic, the number of papers coming out which are showing increased mortality for patients being operated. There's a first paper from Wuhan just yesterday. A paper has come from UK, which shows that anybody who gets surgery done, either elective or emergency during this period, has got up to 24% increased risk of mortality. So if a patient is taken to theatre operated for either emergency or for elective procedure, and he dies on or she dies on table, what are the right steps to do in this particular situation, Dr. Kunal?
So, sir, you're saying that if you are conducting a surgery in this pandemic, where there are high chances of death.
Yeah, emergency surgery, and the patient dies because all the papers are showing there is 23% increased risk of mortality, both from UK and from China. So what are the right steps to do for the doctor or the surgeon?
So, sir, if there is such a situation in this, before starting surgery itself, all the documentation that we all just discussed, all that should be in place. You must have all the clearances, whatever consent is required, that should have been taken. And if unfortunately, if something happens, the standard issue otherwise follow, but because this is a pandemic situation, how to deal with the dead body, all those guidelines, those have to be followed. You have to inform the authorities, and the COVID test of the patient ideally should be done before the surgery, and disposing of the body also, that has different SOPs which have to be followed, because if the patient is positive, then there is further chance of spreading of the infection. So you have to manage this situation very delicately, and before starting the surgery, all the required consent should be taken, and high risk consent in this case should be taken if it's a critical case.
I think I agree with you, Kunal. I mean, there are a lot of things that need to be dealt with. And as Shukumar said, we need to definitely look at consent as an initiation of the dialogue, and then make sure that, as you rightly said, customize for every procedure in that true sense of term. The consent form should have enough space for us to write those little things. And today we can, with the computer, we can type it probably, and we can also have the vernacular languages, and also we can have the interpreters, and a lot of things can be done. And obviously,
Dr. Amarnath, no, see, as Dr. Shivkumar said, whatever you type, still there can be loopholes, and a lawyer still can find problems in that.
True.
So I don't know. I don't think there is an ideal informed consent. Maybe we just have to cover the basics correctly, and then I think that's it. There is no way you can have a foolproof informed consent, because the procedures differ. Whatever you write, at least 1 or 2 points will be missed, and we may end up, getting caught in that. So I think this is now getting scary. Actually, this operating and so much of legal issues. I don't know how we should proceed. It's real challenge.
John, the thing is that at least you must have at least something to produce in a consumer court. The problems, the cases which we've come across where hardly any consent or just a blanket consent is taken. So that
correct.
is taken very negatively. So instead of overcomplicating this issue, at least go for a basic consent form so that you have something to prove yourself in the court, because just verbal evidences will not stand.
Yes, I think it should be a standard informed consent. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
I think we will all, Kunal, if you have, you can share us one sample copy of informed consent, please.
Sure. I'll mail it to Dr. Kumar.
Yeah, anyone, either Amarnath or me or even Kaushik. You can send one standard, and even if Dr. Shivkumar can add and send one in a proper or a standard informed consent, I think we could work on that.
Yeah, one more thing. Many times, especially surgeons, they say that to the anesthetist. Since I've been anesthetist, I come across so many things. Even the anesthetist, we refuse the case for so many things. Surgeons say that the patient has given a grave risk consent. Okay, please, there's nothing like a grave risk consent. Never ever practice it. It carries no meaning in the court of law. There is nothing like a grave risk consent. Telling that patient is authorized, patient is accepting even the death on the table consent. I've seen so many times it is not acceptable in the court of law. So high consent, high risk consent acceptable, but the grave risk consent is not at all accepted in the court of law.
But we have been told about grave risk consent, and we do practice it even now. I don't know what Shrikant has got to say. We take grave risk consent in senior citizens, 80 plus, 90 plus.
No. See, ISA, okay, ESA, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. Okay, depending upon the risk factors who grade it. But there is nothing like a grave risk consent. Not at all there.
Oh, it's just an informed consent.
There is nothing like a grave risk consent.
You're saying it's not legally valid. Is that what you're saying? Because many
but when there is a high threat of complications or death, fatality, then how is that we are going to cover that in the? I think we have to type it in the informed consent itself.
We are taking high risk.
That comes under the ESA grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4, grade 5. Okay.
Huh.
So with or without surgery, probably if he's going to die, that will call it as a very high risk or very high risk emergency case. So whatever the whoever takes, many times. And the other day I came across one consent form. The patient is willing or relatives are willing to accept a death on the table. Okay, I don't think anybody will accept, any patient will accept a death on the table, okay, for whatever may be the seriousness of the disease. But there is nothing like a grave risk consent. I have gone to literature even in other countries also, but we have stopped respectively in Dharawad grave risk consent format. So
that's a new, I think that's a valid point. We never thought about this. What Dr. Kunal has got to say about it?
So high risk consent is accepted, but what Dr. Shivkumar is saying about grave risk consent, yes, that is a debatable issue and it is an evolving subject. Like I said, sir, the more and more judgments from higher courts when they come, then the guidelines become clear on this aspect. Like this was Samira Kohli judgment. Now, what the idea is that to update ourselves through these judgments, because when Supreme Court gives some guidelines, then those are binding across the courts through all the country. Now, grave risk consent is one such gray area where there are different opinions, like Dr. Shivkumar said. So the basic, to summarize, because this is a never-ending discussion that we can have. To summarize is to summarize all this. Have documentation with you. Try to keep it in a simple format. Preserve it digitally because that option is available with us. Keep it at least with yourself for a period of 2 years, so that because that is the time until which a case can be filed against you. And sensitize your staff, your entire team towards consent taking, because the problem arises when there is communication gap. If your hospital staff, sometimes if it's arrogant, and when the communication goes vary, then these legal cases happen. So if the communication with the patient is healthy, is good, all the details are given, then this situation might never arise. So if we follow basic principles, I think we will be good on this issue.
Okay, basically it is a rapport between the patients and the doctors.
Yes, yes.
Yes, I think it's right what you say. Okay, Prakash is on.
Prakash?
Before Dr. Prakash comes in, Dr.
Prakash
Kunal,
is still
different
there a
states
challenge.
have mentioned.
I think Amar.
Yeah.
Next talk of Kunal, is he going to cover, Kunal, are you going to cover important aspects of COVID medical legal issues?
No, John, what we have planned is, we'll definitely give the choice to Kunal. See, what we are talking about is the outpatient practice and the telemedicine and the digital consultations. There are a lot of issues coming in.
Yes, so that is one which is important.
He's covering that first, and then we can elaborate later on what we want, and we can combine those parameters. And then obviously Shivkumar also will be happy to join us then.
Sure.
And
so what Kunal Sethi has got to say, Kunal, you are going to emphasize on the medical legal issues of the COVID now.
Yeah,
we want to hear that from you.
What was told to me by Dr. Amarnath was, let us discuss on this telemedicine guidelines, which MCI has issued, and let us speak on that. What precautions are to be taken, what record keeping has to be done in this scenario, because this sort of practice of seeing patients digitally is going to go on for a long period of time. It's not going to be normal anytime sooner. So that is one topic which we had decided. But if you want certain aspects to be covered, sir, I would be happy to include them.
Okay, I think Srikanth and Bharat can give some points so that Amarnath can pass it on to Dr. Kunal. And the important COVID issues now, because the general anesthesia, general consent and all, this has been discussed in various forms. Now we want to listen about this COVID challenge, what we are facing. So please focus on that and give some questionnaires to Dr. Kunal, so he will come, mentally prepared, and he will be able to, give answers to our doubts.
I think one point which we can include is the recent ordinance which was included for protection of doctors.
Yes,
that is something which we can add, because there's something that's a positive development which was demanded since a long time.
So here also, Kunal, there is doubt. One state government says 3 years imprisonment, central government says 7 years imprisonment, and this says 50,000 penalty, that says 5 lakh penalty. So which is going to be applicable, this or that?
I'll tell you, sir. In this, central government came with one beautiful ordinance law. Definitely, definitely it will teach a lesson to the litigants. But the state government, which the ordinances have passed, okay, with amendment, it has given a lot of relaxations. You must have seen in other places, okay, the healthcare doctors, healthcare workers were threatened and they were arrested and released on bail. So the state, what they incorporated in this law is, it's a bailable, whereas the central is non-bailable.
Non-bailable.
So
Yes.
when there is a central law, state government law cannot supersede it. Probably the state government law can be challenged PIL in this week. Probably I may be involving in that. And whatever the central law is
non-bailable, sir. National Security Act.
This duality of law, I know people may take advantage of this. Which is the one. Yes.
Because state law is available, central is not available. State law is 3 years imprisonment. Central is 7 years imprisonment.
7 years imprisonment. That's what I'm telling you.
So
whether central law is not passed in Parliament,
it's an ordinance.
Yeah, it is applicable for the period of 6 months.
It is not a law.
It's an ordinance.
Ordinance.
Passed in the both houses, then it becomes
Once this pandemic goes, that law also goes.
Yes.
That law goes. So now the issue is, suppose something happens in Karnataka and a case is filed. Now, which will act? Is this a state government that will act, or it's a central government act that is going to be applicable? I don't know. This is so much of confusion in all this. I think Kunal can brief us later on as to what is.
I think I'll include this in the next topic, sir, because I'll include all the details of the ordinance.
Kunal, coming to the point of the next meeting, I will mail you all the details.
Okay.
One would be running the regular virtual, running the actual clinic, the regular clinic what we practiced. Going to go see the patient and then close the shutter, come back. That is one to look at. Second would be the digital platform of the patients with the COVID situation, obviously, how we are taking it. And naturally, the other ordinance which we to discuss about. I will definitely come back to you on all those things. And we will also look at what are the dates that you are available, and then we will focus on that.
Amar, Srikanth had sent a huge list of questions today. Please forward that to,
In fact, that's exactly, I was having the situation.
Let him pick up some questions from that. He has done elaborate work on that.
I'll ask you one particular question now regarding COVID warriors who unfortunately succumb to the infection and die. Different states have given different amount of compensation, and some states like Orissa have said that they are going to be martyrs. So how, if somebody dies, how exactly, what is the process to apply for the compensation? And what exactly the martyr status mean? Does it mean it will help the family members of the doctors or not? So I just want some clarification if you can kindly share.
Srikanth, unfortunately in Karnataka, if you die, you don't get anything.
Is it, sir? Okay.
Yes, you have to go to Orissa and die, or Punjab, Haryana, and Delhi. If you die here, they are not giving you salaries, man. Forget about martyrship, compensation, job. All that is in Orissa, or Haryana, or Punjab, or Delhi. We are unfortunate people. Karnataka government doesn't consider anything for us. We should not die now. That's all.
What do you say, Dr. Kunal? What's the situation in Maharashtra and Karnataka?
See, sir, this is the question of compensation. In at least as far as Maharashtra is concerned, this is they have not given any clear-cut guidelines. It varies from situation to situation. Like suppose there was an issue where migrant laborers, if it's a big episode, it's highlighted by the media, then the compensation granted by the state government and the central government is on the higher side. So it depends on the gravity of the situation, what it happens, how it happens, and how much it is highlighted. So unfortunately, that is the norm which is followed in our country. So as such, there are no standard guidelines across the country where there will be a fixed amount of compensation. It will vary from situation to situation, from state to state, from authority to authority.
I think you're right. I think we can't have a blanket thing, but as Dr. Shivkumar was talking about, he's going to be
Amarnath.
He's going to put in PIL.
Amarnath, this compensation issue should be uniform throughout the country.
That's exactly. See, that's exactly what Shivkumar is talking about.
Because if you leave it on the state,
insurance coverage, and especially in Karnataka.
Karnataka is very bad. You ask Dr. Shivkumar, he will tell you. Karnataka is very bad. Where is the nothing they have been announced?
As per the insurance coverage in Karnataka. No, I'm telling you. See, the government doctors, if they are involved in the COVID ward work, if they become positive, okay, if they die, then only they get the compensation. If the private doctor goes voluntarily, you will not get anything. Private doctor voluntarily joins because of the administration. People have asked him to support them. You will not get even a single NP. Probably you will be quarantined more than anybody else. But government doctors, if they are involved only in the COVID work, they will be compensated at the present Karnataka Insurance Act. What they have this thing.
Karnataka is very bad. We should go to Orissa or Delhi now.
I think in Maharashtra they have said an amount of 5 lakhs that they have announced.
Delhi has announced 1 crore. And Naveen Patnaik in Orissa has announced 1 crore, 50 lakhs will be given upfront.
Yeah.
And then afterwards he'll give 50 lakhs, then he'll give a job.
Yes.
And the salary will be paid to the family till the death, till the tenure of the service of the gentleman will be given, and then martyrhood will be given. Okay. And a job for the dependent will be given. So many measures he has announced.
Yes.
Whereas in Karnataka, 5 lakhs, it's a pittance. A value of a doctor, you can imagine what happens. That is why, and they expect us to work hard and take all risks.
In Maharashtra, I think they have covered the paramedical staff also, and they have kept the upper limit at 50 lakhs.
No, that is insurance coverage, but this is from the government. Government taking insurance and giving is a different story altogether. I think we are unfortunate that in Karnataka we are hardly valued. Right from beginning, we had so many issues 2 years back. You know how the health minister came down on us and what all he did. I don't know. So anyway, I think this goes on and on now. Kunal will never be left, allowed to go now. I think it'll go on and on. I think we'll conclude now. Thank you very much, Kunal. It was fantastic listening to you. This is just like never-ending story. And Dr. Shivkumar added value to us today. He gave his knowledge, and tomorrow also you please be there at the next edition of this.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. My pleasure.
Yes, and I think Amarnath will wind off because Prakash is...
Thank you. Kunal, I think I really appreciate your time and the effort that you have given us, and then with the barrage of questions. In fact, we have a lot of questions which we need to be asking you, and I'm going to share your email IDs. Is it all right with the group if I do that?
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot. Thank you. So that they can be in touch with, because there are a lot of things that we need to deal with.
You can email your questions to Dr. Kunal.
I'm going to send that. I'm going to send that to them.
Because that will save time. He can just pick up and answer. Yeah.
Absolutely. So with that in mind,
Can I have your mobile number?
I'm going. Yeah, 988 60.
Yeah.
98860 46638.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Kaushik, we need to wrap up, but Kaushik, I need to really warn you people, because this is not a nice thing to have security issues. Are you there, Kaushik? Kaushik is busy with another phone call. Amit, Ganesh?
I'm here, sir, and I will look into it, sir.
Ganesh, see, make sure that there's Amit Dwivedi, if he comes in tomorrow or whenever, you have to block him for the time being, because that is one thing which we saw. And Kaushik, we need to really investigate what happened here.
Yeah, we'll get into the recording and see why it happened. Because I have not seen that. I have to check the recording. If something has happened illegal, then it will be punished. If it is, we have to see from where it has come. We'll come to know about the source, sir.
Amit Trivedi?
See, I don't know. There's a doctor called Dr. Amit Trivedi. He's the one who's written some abusive languages here, and it could be coming from his phone. I don't know.
Abusive language.
Sir, you see that
in the chat column.
Absolutely, see that, sir. You see that.
Okay. 1 second, sir. 1 second.
It's already there. Come on, Kaushik.
I'm not able to see that, Amar. Where is it?
Oh my God!
Sir, at what time? What is the time mentioned?
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock.
1 second, sir.
I'm taking a screenshot of that.
Yeah, I'll also take.
No, you can write to him. You can write to him as to this offensive content.
No, we need to know the telephone number.
Your device, identify yourself. 557, 558. 5:58,
6
o'clock.
6 o'clock, sir. 6 o'clock is there.
6 o'clock.
We'll
From
find it out.
Dr.
Find
Amit,
it out.
Amit Trivedi to everyone. Please shut up. Okay.
Yeah, don't read it, Kaushik. it's too-
Ganesh, can we get the screen, phone number of this Amit Trivedi?
Just take
We'll
action.
find it
Ganesh?
out, sir. We'll find it
Huh?
out with this one. We'll
Huh?
find it out.
You take a screenshot and send Amar.
Yeah, I've already got that, but we don't have the telephone number. We'll find out.
Ganesh, can we get the phone number of this guy?
We'll find it out, sir. We'll find
Okay.
it out.
Amarnath sir, let me call you in half an hour time. Okay, sir?
Thank you. Thank you all. All the best. Thank you, Kunal. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Kaushik. Thank you, Amit, for your
Thank you,
initiative.
sir.
Shivkumar, you can call me now.